GSISTV.org, ChuckHaroldSecurityGuideTV.com. Our next guest, Mr. Sean Aarons, AffiliatedEngineers.com. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Right.
AffiliatedEng.com.
Now, part of Security Cares today, we're going to talk about something that's really interesting, and I bet you a lot of you people probably didn't realize this is happening or you can do this. Sean's going to talk about assessing access, I can't even say it, accessing assets through hacking, deception, and control of the most sophisticated computers, which is not mine, the human mind, right? So basically we're going to talk about how to get into buildings, get into areas with nothing except your good looks and how to talk your way through. And you're going to find that this is successful in about 99% of the time. But first, let's talk about your background. You go around the country, well, around the world actually, and you do security assessments.
That's absolutely right, yep.
And you go into buildings and say, you need a new camera, and your door lock's not working, and here's the best practices, and people look at the list and they say, well, we fix all that stuff. And guess what? Even though they put that in place, people can still get in.
Absolutely. So when we do our assessments, some of our clients ask us to actually validate the security. And so by doing that, we'll use technical methods as well as operational methods, social engineering, to gain that access and validate if security is performing the way it should.
I remember there was a study that came out years ago that said if you increase security to the level of a Marine, complex, U.S. Marine base, you're still only enhancing your security by 15%, right? Even if you go that high. So this has to do with human behavior, right, and how it interacts with the technology you've put in place. And it all comes back to if your human in place is not performing their job, I'm going to be able to talk my way past him, no matter what access controls you have in place at all, right? So let's talk about our first question here. What do you mean by hacking the human mind?
So what I mean by hacking the human mind is I basically want to build a rapport. How many people have been in investigations? All right, so what do you do with your interviewee? You don't even know it, but you're applying social engineering to build rapport, to build trust. I do the same thing, but at an accelerated process because the individuals that I'm speaking with don't realize that I'm building that rapport. The reason it takes so much time for you to do it is because they do realize it and they keep kind of holding things back.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. So it's the good cop, bad cop in an interrogation, and I don't want to tell you what's happening because if I do, I'm in trouble and I'm guilty. But the better rapport I build as investigator, if the guy likes me, he's going to give up some information.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah. All right, so why do you say this is the greatest weakness in these systems?
Because we're not doing any training around it. I've not seen a program yet that basically addresses physical, social engineering tactics, how to address them, how to understand them, what is elicitation, what is exploitation. So there is suspicious activity reporting that is being promoted by DHS, but we don't go beyond that. We're not teaching security on how to recognize someone who's building rapport. Like, for instance, if I wanted to build rapport with you, I'd be like, so how are you doing today, right? Human touch, perfect example of building a rapport very quickly with an individual.
So I got hired years ago to try to get into Sony. Doing something, they didn't call it this back then, I guess, but there was like 9 gates at Sony Security, and I came from the studio business, I knew the business. I put on a little ball cap that looked like Spielberg. Remember Spielberg had that certain ball cap he wore? I got a camera bag, shorts, t-shirt. I ran up to the gate, out of breath, and said, I got to get this camera on stage 10. If I don't get on stage 10, I'm going to be fired. We got a show going on. Every single gate let me in. I did this for 8 hours until one guard at the end of shift said, wait a minute, weren't you here at 8 o'clock this morning trying to get in the studio? Come to my office. And then he caught me, and I was discovered, but I got through their whole system for 8 hours a day doing that.
So what you're doing is you're applying props.
Props, not
you're
rapport.
You're applying props to
right.
basically enhance that rapport or the ability that you belong in that environment. Perfect example. So social engineering is mostly known for phishing. Everybody know what phishing is, right? And how many people here have almost clicked on that link? Like, well, it looks like FedEx. I've been one, right? So now, if we can do that through a computer, how effective do you think I would be in person with that individual? Being able to build rapport and be able to say, oh, via sympathy or retaliation or reciprocation, hey, you need to do this because of X, or, I'm carrying these boxes, can you help me get in through the door? Or in a moment of excitement. Everybody's seen that Jimmy Kimmel thing where the woman basically spills the beans on her passwords And they basically say, oh, what's your date of birth? And right, we saw that, right?
Right.
So the reason that happened is because they're in a moment of excitation. I'm on TV. I'm on TV. Oh, this is an opportunity for me. And they forget some of the basic aspects of security.
Now, what I did isn't it different, though? I wasn't building a rapport. I was creating some urgency. They believed the urgency.
You built rapport.
Did I?
Because
Okay.
that rapport was that they believed that you were someone they didn't want to stop. You
Well,
had that
I also
rapport.
I'm also made it feel like if they didn't let me in, they'd get in trouble.
So that's retaliation. That's another aspect of social engineering to gain access. So key for me for social engineering is really understanding my subject. So when I talk to my subject, I use somatic cues, right, to look at them. So if they start blinking fast at me, I know that I'm not building rapport with that individual. If they start crossing their arms, I know they're not building rapport with that individual. If I'm sitting at a desk, I'll start to do things and see if they mirror my activities. Because when you build rapport, they subconsciously want to be with you, right? So they will actually mirror your activities. Now I know I have got rapport with them. So now I can go to elicitation. Elicitation is where I'm saying, hey, what kind of security you have here? I got to work at this building. I'm in a similar, work environment, challenging day, and I'm trying to get agreeance. So now I'm getting them to agree with me, nodding my head. Yeah, it's a rough day. Yeah, I've had the same issues. Now I can, if I want to, I'll take that information, use that in a subsequent attack with another subject saying, oh yeah, I know Carl at the desk, well, he's got 2 kids and everything like that. And now I'm continuing that rapport to ultimately exploit an individual to gain access.
A lot of psychology involved in this.
That's all psychology, absolutely.
Now, you don't have a PhD or anything. How did you
No.
learn all this stuff? Is this just kind of naturally coming to you or what?
You know what? I've been doing social engineering. I've got a shirt. One of my clients gave me this saying, I'm a social engineer. And I recognize when I did this discussion with him, like, what the heck do I do? How do I build rapport? So I had to build a set of notes to basically kind of identify it. And then I started realizing, and I think the one key component that I really want to get out of this conversation with you, this dialogue, is that no one has any training around this. We're doing cyber
No
awareness.
countermeasure training.
Countermeasure, right?
Right.
So we need to teach people like what build rapport is and report that so we can see if people are attacking our most important assets to gain access to our building.
Now, certainly we have policies and procedures. Everybody out here in the security business has a policy and procedure you follow. The basic access control rule is what? No. That's the rule. Nobody comes in unless I validate you, authenticate you, right?
Just like GSX.
Oh, well, by the way, I was going to ask you, how did you get in here? Because I don't think I gave you a pass. You must
Well,
just talk to
when
me
I
in the
was
door.
helping you with your bags,
That's
why don't you tell that story?
That's right. Okay, let's tell that story. So, perfect example. I had to get him in early for a pre-interview, right? He does not have a vendor ID. We know the rule, right? Only vendors, exhibitors, or staff can come in here early. I brought him up to the door. The guard rightfully said, I'm sorry.
2 security staff.
2 security staff. He can't come in.
Thou shalt not pass.
But I'm security guy radio. You have to let him in. Nope. Not going to happen. But I have a vendor ID and an exhibitor ID and a staff ID. Nope. It's not going to happen. Okay.
No, then he said,
Tell us
but
what this guy did.
he needs a wristband. And he's talking to Chuck, and I break off. I look around me, and there's a whole bunch of wristbands on the desk. So I go over to the desk. I'm just messing around here for about 30 seconds putting this wristband while Chuck is misdirecting him, keeping him occupied. I put the wristband on. I go up to Chuck. I show the guard. He's like, okay. And then the other guy goes, hey, do you belong here? And I just walked away from him. And
And
at
you didn't
that
challenge
point,
him, right.
that rapport was he belongs here.
Well,
So that's social engineering.
and here I'm wearing a suit and I have staff ID, so there's an assumption that probably he's okay.
We have rapport.
Yeah. Now, another case, doing a security assessment, went to a building, had not a guard in the lobby. He was really like a concierge, but his job was to stop people. Walked up, I need you to sign in. Okay, for 3 days, wrote Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, Mickey Mouse, never once
North
checked
Pole.
ID, never once looked at the thing we filled out, right? Let us in every time. Now, we were authorized, but this stuff is not as difficult to do as you think it is. And by the way, it's how successful?
I'm about 80% successful at numerous attempts. So if I don't get in with one person, I'll try another person. I'll break off an engagement once I notice that I'm not being able to build rapport with that individual and I've got no success. Okay, well, great, thanks. And I'll try another avenue. My best way for social engineering into any facility is the loading dock.
Because? Can you be more specific about that?
Because when you walk on the loading dock, everybody's moving and shaking. I'll take a roll of drawings. I'll have a vest, a prop, or what have you, and they believe I belong. So they don't ask me any questions. No one challenges me, because how many times your facility's under construction, right? How many people would go up to the contractors and say, hey, do you belong here? And they just perceive that I belong there based on the elements that I have, the props that I have. And again, all this stuff is on cyber awareness, and we're not looking at the human factor, someone going directly and attacking that facility. And as things get more complex in cyber world, that exploitation is going to become much more readable, especially with the mobile credential. I can't wait till the mobile credentials rolled out. Once I see that, I'm going to be able to affect social engineering maybe 99% of the time.
All you have to do is say, here's my credential, here's my phone. Oh, it doesn't work. And I'm wearing a suit and I got to get to a meeting. Well, okay.
I doubt anybody's going to ask me. It's too much of an inconvenience.
Yeah.
If I said, can I see your phone to show me your credential? That's just like, it's very, it's antagonistic.
Yeah.
Like, I don't trust you, right? And in this day and world, that's where we're at. We're in a happy bubble. Everybody trusts everybody. No one wants to do anything, harmful. When I meet people afterwards, they're like, but you were so nice.
So here's a story. This happened when I had my private eye license 15 years ago. And this is not trying to gain access. This is trying to get data out of people, right? So I would get hired by law firms to go find people's assets for collection after a lawsuit. My biggest scam, the most successful one I did, I put on an orange vest. I'd get a roll of tape, that measures distance. I'd have a camera. Sometimes I brought a photographer with me. I'd walk up in front of your house, and I'd roll up on the sidewalk and take measurements. I'd take photographs. I'd look at the street sign. And this guy would walk outside after 5 minutes and go, can I help you? And I'd have a clipboard that had a printout of all the other properties in the neighborhood with the people's names on it, their neighbors, little notes about things, yes, no, that kind of thing. I'd say, hey, I'm from the studios. We're doing location hunting. I want to use your house to film a movie. I think it's a perfect location. Can we do it? We pay $800 a day. Here's a $100 bill just to show you my good faith. The guy takes a $100 bill, right? He says, I want to do it. What do I got to do? I need you to fill out these forms. These people put down their bank account information, what their balances were, routing numbers for auto deposits, anything I wanted on that form. They filled it out. I paid them for it, right? So it's, it's kind of legal because I paid them. And we used it then to go back and say, we're seizing your bank account and taking your money in this judgment for a lawsuit. Now, that was data mining, I guess, old school, right? Physical. Not entry. But so you can use these same techniques to get information out of people almost as easy as you can to gain access. And that's dangerous. And everybody knows the guys on the phone now. Hi, it's Microsoft. A friend of mine almost was taken 2 weeks ago for $800,000 on a phone call where she went back and forth, bought the gift certificates, did all the things she said on the phone. And 1 second she said, I'm going to call Chuck and ask him about this. And I said, stop. And she was an hour away from losing $800,000. So this is pretty serious stuff.
It absolutely is. And that's why you see so much happening on the phone, because that rapport can be built up very quickly. There's a problem with your Windows.
Okay, but I don't get that on the phone. I don't get...
It's easy to do.
If I'm not in person, I can understand that, say, hey, this guy walks the walk, talks the talk. I trust him. But on the phone, how can that rapport be built so fast?
Because you're building yourself as an expertise around Windows systems, operating systems. Elderly people have a significant fear that they're going to be compromised on their computer systems. So when they get a call from an authoritative, I'm from Microsoft, telling you that your computer is broken, they are, how do I fix it? What do I need to do? And they open up the back door. So they have that person on the phone is building rapport very quickly by establishing that they're an authority and I'm going to help you, minimize your security risks.
Makes sense.
Because there's a lack of knowledge in that area. So asking the right questions and what do we need to do and what have you, and understanding when someone is, building that rapport is extremely important, because individuals like me, it's happening. I'll show you really how easy. How many people fly on planes?
Everybody flies.
Oh,
right?
We got a number of people. And for the other ones, don't ever fly on a plane. Anyway, so when you're flying on a plane, how many people try to get first first upgrades or, you got update seats or whatever like that? Nobody? Okay, well, I'm going to give you a little mind hack. When you approach the woman, what's on her lanyard? What's the information that you can use about that attendant? Name, first name, right? So when I approach anybody and I see those ID cards with first name, that's golden. Because I'll walk up to them, smile. Hey, how you doing? Sharon, how are you? Hey, listen, I just had such a rough day. And she's like, oh, tell me about it. Is there any seat availability? Anything that you can do to, help me out? I just want to get a couple Z's. Well, let me see what I can do. Oh, anything you do, I really appreciate it. You look thirsty. Can I get you a soda? I'm going over there anyway, right? Next person goes up. Hey, this is ridiculous. I've been waiting here for an hour and a half. What's going on with my ticket? What's the problem? Who do you think gets the upgrade? And it happens. And if you don't believe me, try it. Walk up to the person, call them by their first name, and see how fast you can build rapport. Immediately, they will be unhappy. As you approach them, you say their name. That immediately is a recognized thing. Now you've got rapport. They're smiling at you. That's another trigger. Now I got you.
That seat next to the emergency exit it's like really big and open, right? I always get that seat. First thing you do is walk up to the counter, say, hey, I know nobody likes that emergency row. I've been doing it a long time. I'm a retired police officer. I can get people out of this plane. They move me from wherever I am to that big giant opening by the emergency door that has lots of leg room, which I would have charged, $35 for an upgrade or whatever it is, right? I get that seat every time. So this stuff is real, and it really does work. Now, does that mean we're sociopaths? It kind of does.
Are you?
Well, I don't know. That's kind of sociopathic behavior, isn't it?
I submit everybody is doing social engineering. They just don't realize it.
No, that's true. In your day-to-day life, you do, right?
I mean, when you're talking to a large telecommunications provider trying to get that lowest cost or what have you, you're social engineering. You don't know you're doing it, but you are doing it. You're trying to build rapport to basically manipulate to get what you want.
Or you're being polite.
I'm trying to get access.
You're being polite. Another way to look at it. Be nice.
Be nice, being polite. But if you're trying to get something, you're manipulating them to get it. It's social engineering.
So let's talk about misdirection. That's a subcomponent of this. This is where if we're not getting where we want to go, we're going to take the extra step to misdirect, like we did at the door.
Magic.
Right? I'm talking to the guy. You grab the wristband. He's not paying attention. Boom. How do you do that as an individual? How do you misdirect without a team?
So it's very difficult to do it without a team, but it is possible. What I'll do is I'll use the surrounding environment to support that misdirection. So, for instance, if I want to get access to a facility during, high peak time, I'll go in there. They're going to be watching the turnstiles. The turnstiles are always going to be going into an alarm. I need to have another method to get into that facility, right? So by evaluating that, what I'll do is essentially watch what they're doing and see when that alarm goes off and see how long they are delayed in that process. And it's pretty much consistent, right? So now I got a time frame that I can work on. And if there's a door that opens up at the same time, he turns around. Where'd he go? Where'd he go? Another good example of social engineering, which I like, is it gets you out of trouble too. So let's say I get hit. I get picked up by this guy. He got me dead to rights. Security guy says, hey, what are you doing here? Well, I'm working with a contractor. And he's just nailing me. He gets on the radio. He's like, yeah, I've got a guy here, by the name, blah, blah, blah. And I gave him a fake name. It's like, no, we don't have anybody. Bring him down to security. And I said, you know what? I forgot my wallet out in the car. Can I go get my ID? And the guy goes, okay, go get your ID. Social engineering. Absolutely.
Works. Now, is this
because it's a heightened moment? They don't really realize it's not something that we're programming. With that mission statement that we were talking about with security staff, how I got into GSX, he was at, thou shalt not pass without a red rip. And you basically distracted him, and I sat there for a good trying. You know how hard it is to put those things on? I'm just like trying to, and he never looked over.
Now, what can we do about this? I think this happens a lot more than people think. Now, the question is, how do you know it's happening? Because if the guy sneaks in undetected and he's not on your access control list, he's not on your ID cards, he's not on your cameras, how do you know he's there? And what was he successful at gaining? I think it happens more than people realize. What do you think?
I totally agree. I think that we're just brushing the surface at how vulnerable our organizations are because of the happy bubble that we live in. and how people are exploiting that happy bubble. So it really comes down to awareness and training. This is an OPSEC type of control that we need to put in place. We need to put in protocols. We need to identify, and put people through role playing. I think role playing is extremely powerful because you see firsthand, and then you can kind of fail on paper rather than in real life. And it also conditions us. It conditions us, so if we get approached, by Channel 7 News and they're like, oh, so tell me about your password, what's your dog's name? Oh yeah, we don't elicit any of that information, being distracted by what's happening in the background.
I was speaking to somebody else about something similar to this, right? And we're going to call it penetration testing, although it's in the physical world. And their rule was this: if you do this successfully and are not caught, and you call up the agency and talk to them, and they say, oh boy, thanks a lot, we'll work on that. If you do it and you are caught, that's better. The organization will respond better to you failing at the attempt, because now they have something tangible to show the guard that says, you caught this guy trying to sneak in, we're publicly vulnerable. Whereas if you actually get in and nobody knows about it, it didn't happen.
That's the challenge.
Right.
That I think when I did one of my assessments, the head of IT was extremely upset of how much information we got. And the administrative officer basically said, hey, listen, I get it that you can break into our buildings. I get that. I know that all day long. What I don't get is how you got in and how you got out, and no one knew about it. So in one exercise, my client said, I need to know that you were in my building. I said, okay, what do you want me to put a business card? No, he's like, I need a real validation that you've been in my building. Okay. So I get in the building, I get to the facilities department, I open up the key box, I take all the keys, I move all their cars. There's validation for you.
What are we going to do about this? I mean, are we going to train people to be social hackers on the protective side of it so they know how to counter it? I mean, that's a lot of training.
It's a lot of training, but as we move away from the ID, if we do move away from the ID and we move to this mobile credential of convenience, it's going to make it much, much easier. And then we're going to see exploitation of cyber vulnerabilities, man-in-the-middle attacks, dropping rubber duckies and what have you, on the physical network itself. So it's incumbent on us to be proactive, and that's why I'm here to have this discussion with you,
right.
Because I'm looking at all these assessments and I'm looking at everything, and it's commonly, I'm seeing the same thing over and over, and I don't see any training around it. And when I talk to people about it, they're like, we don't have anything. Well, we've got cyber awareness training. If you do anything on social engineering, it's all cyber. We've got videos to address this and what have you. There's nothing that talks about the physical applicability of social engineering, which is ultimately tradecraft. I mean, this is what the NSA, CIA have been doing.
That's true.
This
right?
is what police have been doing to develop informants. This has been around a long time. It's just branded and evangelized by the IT world as social engineering.
So basically, you can put in every single device we see at the show, 550 vendors, put every one of these things in your building, you can still get in. That's the bottom line.
If the person's going to let the door open, another good example, so high security building, tall tower, I had a breezeway, I basically gain access to the building. There's security all over the place, but one side is quasi-public and one side is secure. But you got to go through this breezeway, and there's a guard, literally, this big heavy guy sitting at the door, and he's basically validating, looking at the ID picture to see who you are. And I'm like, well, I'm never going to get in there. So I just sat in the building, just going up and down the building all day. So the security guards would see me, security officers would see me and understand that I belonged in the environment.
You're familiar.
Yeah, so they're seeing me. They're like, oh, you're. So later in the night, I'm getting ready to do my elicitation and exploitation because I think I'm building rapport, and the guy's gone off the door. And I'm like, wow, this is cool. All right, great. So I go up to the door. It's got a biometric device on it. I'm like, okay, back to square one. And so I'm up and down the elevators. I'm trying to figure out what to do. And this officer starts flirting with another woman. And I go up to him while he's distracted. And I say, hey, listen, I forgot my keys in Tower 1. Can I get up? No, thou shalt not pass. Oh, hey, I understand. But I'm not going to be able to get home. Not my problem. Well, my phone's up there too in my briefcase. Can I call my wife? Here's a phone. I'm like, she's going to be so angry with me. Is there anything in it? Thou shalt not pass. All right, can I talk to your supervisor? He's going to tell you the same thing. He's the one that told me not to do this. Okay. So he gives me his phone, calls the phone, talks to me like da-da-da-da. All right, let me talk to him. Gives me the phone. I'm talking to him on the phone, and he's like, nope, not going to happen. Nope, you got to leave now, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, he hangs up. and I continue the conversation. Hey, I really appreciate. Oh yeah, how are the kids? Yeah, I know. I won't do it again. I'm really, really sorry. Okay, thank you. You want to talk to him? Okay, all right, bye. I hand the phone back to him. He's like, I cannot believe that. That has never happened in the world. He walks me into the building. That's social engineering.
Do we have any questions in the audience? I bet we do. Let's get the mic out there. We have the mic we can get out. Somebody may not believe this happens, but I've been doing it for 20 years. You've been doing it for 20 years. It's the easiest way to gain access. Any questions? You can ask us on the mic. Here we go, right here.
Hey, so what would you
Speak a little louder for us.
what would you recommend as kind of like first step in training like a large force to kind of start looking for these things?
So, when I was at the studios, a really secure environment for all kinds of reasons. Intellectual property, talent, everybody wants to get in there. We had the leeway to say no means no, and I'm going to back up my guard, and I don't care if you're Mr. Murdoch. He understands no means no, and Mr. Murdoch did not bring his ID one day, and he was not allowed in the studio, and I got the phone call, but he understood, right? So if you can go back to a basic access control protocol of the answer is you can't come in until I validate you, that's a start. That's not really training, but it's going to plug some of these holes. And the reason a lot of guards let people in is why? They don't want to get in trouble for saying no to somebody. That's classic. It's human behavior. So that's one way to start. But training, I can't get my head around how you train for this stuff.
It's going to be role playing. Certainly there are technologies that are emerging that will basically integrate IT and physical security. We're not there yet, but literally you could have a whole different kind of visitor management system that's based on Bluetooth beacon, and everyone is going to be badged, contractors alike, and now we're going to use that ID to challenge individuals. If you do not have an ID, you don't belong in this facility.
No, it's easy.
And the mission is, I need to walk you back to security. Always walk you back to security,
right.
And security deals with it. I don't have any rapport with security at that point, so I'm going to get busted. But we're not there yet with technology. We're getting there, but in lieu of that technology, we're going to need to foster an environment where we're going to have to address this type of OPSEC training. And if we don't, we're going to be vulnerable.
Another question. Right behind you. There you go.
I wonder if you never need to adjust for culture. So I look at your example of using the first name. I saw somebody do that when I was in the UK, and the entire immediately seized up because that's not done. You don't use someone's first name.
That's an excellent point.
Right.
And when people use my first name, I'm always suspicious of that for whatever reason. I don't know. So I'm with you on that. That's a good point.
So any part of social engineering, we just don't walk into the building and start, we do reconnaissance. So it's all part of a larger red team exercise. Typically, social engineering is one aspect to gain access. There are other things to exploit, right? But social engineering is the easiest because everyone has that tool. You just need the confidence. You need to be able to get in front of someone and direct your conversation with them and ask for favors or elicitation to support that. But to your point, when we're doing that reconnaissance, we're identifying what's the process, what's the culture, what's going on. And then we use that information that we're gaining to really facilitate that access through elicitation or exploitation. Every goal, every social engineering engagement is going to start off with either misdirection or manipulation with the goals of elicitation, getting additional information to feed into that access process, but ultimately exploiting some individual to gain access.
Another question. Anybody? There we go, right here in front.
You talked about the all the vulnerabilities that you can exploit. What about the solutions, though? What about how do we treat this problem? Do we need education for the companies, or what's the best way to fix this?
Emphasizing, and I think that's an excellent question. Emphasizing the OPSEC. So really, the only way, for instance, let's tailor this to firearms training, right?
Yeah.
So firearms training, you give them a gun and off they go. And are they proficient with the weapon? No, they got to go out there, right? Is there muscle memory that goes associated to that? Do they point their weapon down, right? You have to do that training, that in-person training. There is no way that you're going to get this through a web-based type of training. You need to have that interaction with a social engineer and have them watch them build rapport so they can say, hey, something's going on here. I think something's going on. Deny the access, but the reporting is equally important, because a determined assailant such as myself, I don't just stop with you. You're my single point of contact. If you don't communicate that into the organization, I'm going to come back and try it on somebody else.
Another question. All right, we're good. Give us a close. Give us something that they can use. Go back to the facilities, the organizations, and say, we need to start looking at this. Where should they start an examination to see, by the way, if they're being penetrated, and two, how they can tighten up their policies and procedures maybe?
I think one of the things of training is understanding. So for a social engineer like myself, there's some social engineers that just go out there and just start building rapport by, maybe establishing authority, or, hey, listen, there's reciprocation, and if you do this favor for me, or what have you. A good social engineer will tell you that, okay, here's the body cues that you're exhibiting to me. This is how I know you're building rapport. And by knowing those body cues and not presenting those body cues, and or recognizing that, hey, listen, I have rapport going with this individual, something's going on, this is an opportunity to communicate this up into the organization, be it post orders or what have you, to facilitate that awareness that we may be being targeted. And it's going to be very important for financial organizations and where we're going to get, credit, PII information, or what have you, because ultimately that is what we're trying to, a social engineer is trying to do, get in there, plug something into the network or what have you. Very often are my engagements, hey, I want you to get into R&D and steal this paperwork. It's really all focused around IT, because that's the biggest loss. That's the biggest. So information is power, right? So that's the most important asset that we need to look at.
Fascinating stuff. In reality, I'm a 99-year-old curmudgeon. I just appear happy on the stage. So we're social engineering all the time. Everybody is. Thanks for coming on SecurityGuideTV.com, ASIACB.org at GSX 2019, live from Chicago. Mr. Sean, Affiliated Engineers, Inc., AEIENG.com, correct?
Yes.
Find the guy. He will get into your building. Trust me, I've seen it happen. Back in a minute here, GSX Chicago 2019. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for your questions. Have a great show.